In the chamber this week, we have a special guest here to talk about superheroes here on Fandom Roulette.
Woo!
So, for this week, or for the upcoming weeks, Joe will unfortunately not be here with us. He is off fighting the good fight of the holiday season, making sure that Santa checks his list, maybe even twice. So, for this week, I've brought a special guest here to talk about superheroes. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Sam Revley. I'm an artist and a big nerd when it comes to history, comic books. I love video games, and just really happy to be here.
Nice. All right. So, what have you been up to lately that's been nerdy? Let's follow the same stuff we do with Joe.
Absolutely. So, I'd say the nerdiest thing I've been up to lately is watching Food Wars on Crunchyroll, which has been an absolute delight. So, if you've ever liked Iron Chef, it's like Iron Chef, but in anime style. So, of course, lots of fire, lots of explosions, except with food, and of course it's at a high school because it's an anime. So.
Well, yeah, it has to be.
Of course. What about you, Cody? What have you been up to that's super nerdy?
Well, a lot. I've been kind of dancing around a couple different anime. I've been watching a little bit of JoJo's, a little bit of Gintama. But the big thing that I'm still playing right now is Destiny 2 because it's got me in its iron hooks and it won't let go. It's like an addiction, practically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're here to talk about superhero. Why don't you... I'll let you get started, and I'll probably jump in and ask questions here or there.
Absolutely, please do. This is a topic that I was really excited to get on board with because superheroes are a very distinctive feature of comic book history, which, yes, it's a thing. Comic book history is a thing. They have, seminars. There's a museum in Columbus. It's really cool, awesome, and small field, which, if any of our listeners know a lot about their comic book history, please be so patient with me, because there are so many people who know so much. But with all that said, the reason why I think superheroes are interesting is because it is a very distinctly American feature in comic books. You don't really see it as prevalent in other countries, and it begs to the question of, why is that such a thing? Where does that start? Why are superheroes so prevalent? I'm saying comic books a lot because that's where they started. Obviously, they're in other media nowadays, films and video games and things, but that's, their origin. So, if you were to venture a guess, Cody, where do you think it all started? Just not knowing as much, or maybe you do know a lot.
Well, my comic book history knowledge isn't super wide, but I know a couple of things. Mm-hmm. Cleveland? Okay,
good. Very good. Yes, you've thus proven that you did, in fact, grow up in this area, so good job.
Yeah, big old Superman.
Yeah, Superman, that's right. Superman is a big deal in the history of comic books.
Guys,
basically...
I knew a thing.
You knew a thing, yes, good job. Good job, you knew a thing. Superman came around in Action Comics #1 in 1938, but there are a couple of superheroes that come before him.
I was only partially right then.
This is where it gets hairy. There's not a lot of agreement about this, because before Superman, there were a lot of what I would call they didn't have superpowers, but they were very hero-like.
Okay, so heroes.
Yeah, actually some people have even included Popeye, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Why isn't he a superhero? He eats spinach and gets super strong. How is that, so...
I thought that's just how spinach worked.
Well, I have news for you, Cody.
Oh, no. Damn it. I've been using it all wrong.
This whole time. But really, this is actually one of the things that's kind of cool about superheroes and the origin. I'm going to focus on Superman, even though there are others that could claim the title.
Sure.
But just because there's some things that we can talk about that are a little interesting. For example, I said Cleveland before because that's where the creators of Superman grew up, Jerry and Joe Shuster and Seigel, or Jerry Seigel and Joe Shuster, which, by the way, I'm sure I'm saying their names wrong. I always do. So please forgive me again.
The fans won't.
No, I know. It's a curse. But anyway, what's kind of interesting about them is that they did make this book while they were in high school, and they really were not trying to be comic book artists. They wanted to get in newspapers. That's where everything was. And you had a lot of action, adventure, sci-fi. Lots of genres in the comic strips at that time. You had Dick Tracy, which was Dick Tracy, a detective comic strip. You had Tarzan and the Apes, Terry and the Pirates. Terry and the Pirates was Indiana Jones, essentially.
Nice.
So you had all these cool, very diverse genres, and they loved science fiction, which is why the original Superman, he didn't actually fly. He just jumped really high. So So they were like...
And that seems so cool. Like,
I know.
I kind of wish they had stuck with, like, him not flying, but he's just like, whoa!
Yeah, actually, there's an interesting reason why they stuck with the flying thing, which we can get into later. But, anyway, not to fall too off tangent, basically, you had all these really cool things, and they loved science fiction, and they loved, like, there's this really cool book called Superboys that gets into, like, the history of this. But even, okay, you were a kid, you were in high school, they had, like, their little science fiction dime novels that had, like, little ads in them of, like, how to get strong. Like, if you, like, get this course, you'll get super strong. And a lot of poses in there, people have equated to some of the poses in their, like, early superhero, like, Superman comic strips. So you kind of see the origin of some of this. Yeah. Where this is, like, kids who were interested in, I really do say kids, too, because they were young. Like, people who were interested in action adventure and adding that sci-fi element to add that super element into it. Nice. And that's really where it explodes at that point, and you get the golden age of comic books, which is approximately, like, I want to say, like, late 1930s to 1950. Okay. So we're thinking, like, Superman, Batman, Captain Marvel, but I think what I always like to say is that it's not like it just exploded. There were things before that, like Dick Tracy, the detective comic book. There were actually some villains in this Dick Tracy comic strip that were very Batman-esque. For example, there was one that was literally called Half and Half, and his face, I know. And guess what his thing was?
No, did he flip a coin?
I don't know if he flipped a coin, but there was something really wrong with his face, let me tell you. No,
goodness.
Really, truly. Like, there are places that these people came from. And, like, I mentioned the ads for, like, how to get strong and stuff like that. Like, a lot of their costumes were very much based on, like, think of circus performers, things like that. Like, that's where it all comes from. Okay. But then we get into, basically, you know, World War II, exciting time, like the Great Depression. So
that's super exciting.
Oh yeah, like good times. So I think a lot of people like to look at these big world events and say, no wonder they wanted superheroes. It makes you feel like you have some control over your life in this world that you don't have a lot of control over your life, I think. Or maybe there's this need or this desire to have these vigilantes running around. In fact, it was Jerry Seigel's father who was actually shot in a robbery in Cleveland. So when in 1932, so that was, 1932. So, like, you think about that and you think about, like, he later goes on to, like, basically create this superhero who's bulletproof. Like, you start to, like, make a couple connections there with why. Right? So, but anyway, like, it's really interesting to see where superhero started, and it's kind of easy to see why they got popular. Now, the real question is, like, what happened to all these other comic strips out there? Like, what happened to the detective stories? What happened to, there were romances, there were, like, I want to say, Prince Valiant, like, these fantasy, like, what happened to all these genres that were in comics that kind of disappeared, like, once you get to the 50s? Yeah. Of course, horror comics, too. There were so many good horror comic books. This is where it gets really interesting, because I want to ask you, Cody, is there a genre that's like a little newer, like a storytelling genre, that people tend to be like, I don't know if that's so good for kids? Does any come to mind?
Something that's new?
Maybe
or
newer,
like
newer than comic books. Newer than comic books. It's a visual media. And
the video games.
Absolutely. So, and it's like basically what happens is you can look at what happened to comic books in the 50s, and it's really similar to what happened with video games when they got really popular. So here's what happened with comic books. Comic books exploded. They got really popular. And suddenly, you had lots of kids who were bringing comic books to school with them and reading them in class. And we're talking the 1950s. When you had, like, the people who wanted to have the perfect little family setup where everything was ideal. And you'd have kids who were bringing essentially, like, horror comics and detective books, all kinds of stuff to school. So how do you think that went?
Oh, it went super well.
Oh, so well. They loved it. They said it was...
I love Jason in the classroom.
Of course. But that's really... what happened is that a lot of parents, particularly... There were even comic book burnings in neighborhoods where they... True. And they basically were like, this is terrible and awful for children, and they shouldn't read it because it's bad for them. There was literally a Senate hearing about it.
So what you're telling me, what I'm gathering, adults suck.
Yes, 100%.
I knew it.
100%.
Shit.
And I think this is it gets into, I would be remiss if I... Go ahead, ask the question.
I had a thought. So what happened to the superhero comics in this situation? So, like, were they exempt from the comic burnings, or was there some kind of silver lining to them that saved them?
Here's what happened.
Okay.
So, Senate had a hearing, and publishers freaked out. They're like, oh crap, they can't, we need to still sell our work, and we want them to buy our art and buy our comics. So they said, you know what, don't panic, government, we will take care of this. So they put together this group, it was called the Comics Code Authority, and they made lots of rules. Okay. And the thing is that these publishers put together a lot of these rules that were okay for superheroes, but they weren't okay for lots of things. I'm going to list some of the things that they thought were not okay, and you can start to see how they're just removing the fun from everything. So, no quote-unquote excessive violence.
What?
Can't have it. No lurid, unsavory, gruesome illustrations. No vampires, werewolves.
What? No vampires, period?
No ghouls, no zombies.
What is this Gygax bullshit?
No, you can't use the word horror or terror in anything. Just can't do it.
It's so spooky.
I know, it's far too spooky for young children's minds. No excessive kidnapping, no concealed weapons. You couldn't, no feature, they literally would look at, this all comes from this one big book that was, looking at comics and saying, it was called The Seduction of the Innocent. They're like, look at these books, they're teaching our kids to be criminals, to be, awful people. And they were looking at really, any story outside of superheroes and saying, these horror comics, scrap it. These detective books, scrap it. These romance novels, ooh, that could be lurid. That's what happened. And the superheroes got through. Now, the type of superhero comic books that got through, I would say at the very beginning, think of holy guacamole Batman, let's go get that supervillain over there.
Right.
Think
Batman
that.
Holding a big cartoon bomb over his head, running to the pier.
Yeah, we're talking about very safe comics.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're really looking at, and a lot that really choked diversity in comic books. So that's why the superhero comics came out on top. Partly because they controlled this, and it was actually a really great way. I mean, there were comic book companies who did not make it through this because they totally focused on, horror comics was their thing, or, romance books were their thing, and they just did not make it through this big bottleneck of essentially, no, you can't do that, you cannot print that, that's not okay. To be fair, a lot of people would print stuff anyway, but most distributors wouldn't carry it if they didn't pass this code. So, and that's when you have, the Marvel, DC, these big names who, they decided, you know what? We're going to buckle down. We're going to focus just on superhero comic books. We're going to focus on making comic books that are geared towards dudes between, ages 13 and 18. So, and that's when they made that call. That's when we started seeing this huge focus on
superheroes.
Right. So capitalism ruined everything. So I'm teasing.
Damn it. I knew it. But I didn't have the facts.
Indeed.
I'm well learned now.
Obviously, this became less of a thing over time. The code is not a thing anymore. No one really pays attention to it.
Was there a specific time that it fell off, or was it just kind of a gradual, all of a sudden people were oh, I don't care about that anymore?
No, that's a super solid question. A couple of big companies stopped using it in 2001. I think.
Oh, wow.
DC stopped, and that was big. Or it might have been Marvel or DC. I can't remember which one.
Okay.
But one of them decided not to follow it anymore, and to this day, a couple say they still follow it, but it's defunct. No one, distributors don't, what used to happen is they would, distributors would literally, only receive comic books that had this code of approval. And now your average comic book shop does not care. They will, they'll post what they think is good. So.
Right. Well, I mean, you gotta make sales, right?
Exactly. So, the one thing I really, here's the real reason, well, not the real reason, another reason why I love talking about this. I actually teach cartooning and comic book classes on the side. And one of the classes I teach is manga cartooning. So would you say it's fair to say that manga, if you're reading manga, would there be a stigma around it to some degree? Or when you were in high school?
When I was in high school, it was lame.
Yeah.
Most people would I still read them, but people would make fun of you if you brought them to school or what have you, so I just always had them at home.
No, for sure. And you're definitely not alone. I had a lot of students who, today would come in and they love manga, and they honestly were it's so nice to meet other people who read manga because people make fun of me for it. And I'm That is so silly, because
That's such a shame, because I feel like it's a little more in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. There's just such a huge diversity in manga.
Oh, exactly. Like, that's one thing where a lot, especially in Europe, especially in Japan, you see a lot less. They make all kinds of stories, and it's geared towards everyone. Like, remember when I said a moment ago that Marvel and DC, they basically were like, oh, we're going to focus on guys, and it's going to be in this age range. Like, who's that leaving out?
A lot of people.
A lot of people, right? So if you're, especially, like, it was never a surprise to me that most of my manga classes were mostly girls, because they were actually reading comic books that were geared towards them, like maybe what they're interested in. Like, maybe I don't want to read a comic book that's all about two dudes punching each other for like 2 issues.
Right.
Like, maybe that's not interesting to me as a reader. For the record, I actually do like reading comic books like that. But maybe not. Maybe there are, other readers out there who want to read other things, like other guys or girls who are like maybe more in the mood for a high school romance book or something like that. So manga's really, if you like reading comic books and you want to read outside of what your superhero genre, you're usually looking at, for a long time, you usually would look at other, things from Europe if you were really like fancy, or from Japan. You read a lot of manga. So it's nothing, like, I always say, like, why make fun of someone who's just reading stuff that's like literally just a different, it's like making fun of someone for like liking one thing. I'm trying to think of something now. Like,
I mean, I understand what you mean. It's a silly and here at Fandom Roulette, we're totally, and Joe would agree to this as well, but we're super open to all different kinds of, different nerdy things that we're excited about. Because, I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's a community of people who get passionate about fun stuff. And, if you're not into manga, like, sure, that's totally cool. If you like your Marvel, your DC, you're trying to think of another Dark Horse.
Yeah, there you go, Dark Horse.
Cool. But if you're into manga, if you like your Shonen Jump cartoon or your Shonen Jump mangas and things like that, like, totally awesome. So yeah, I totally get it. Like, I think it's silly that people bully things over pictures and words. I know, it's so crazy. I think that's why I always loved bringing this up for that reason. It's just like, there are historic reasons why, that the way things happened the way they did. I think I would also add too that I would be remiss to say that it's not like all like other genres went away. Like, there are so many other genres that stuck through and are present today. But anywho, just looking at superheroes as a whole, I wanted to ask, like, do you read any like superhero comics today, like Cody? Gosh, I haven't picked up a comic in a long time. I've watched a lot of, I've seen the Marvel movies, I've seen some of the DC ones, but the actual comic medium, not really. I've kind of faded out of it, I guess. I don't know a better word for it, because it's not like I don't like comics. I just don't. I guess I've had little time in reading comics to kind of fell off. No, that's real. Actually, even today, a lot of, if you look at Marvel and DC, for example, what they make their most profit off of merchandise or their movies, like the comics, like they still do, but it's such a small part of what they do. So that's real. Like, I would say most people nowadays, when they experience superheroes, it's going to be like on the big screen. It's going to be, or in a TV show like Daredevil, or the like Supergirl, which I love, like an amazing show. But I think like the one thing I always thought was interesting about any superhero in any context is that thinking about it all came from this initial idea of thinking of that Great Depression or these big world wars and this desire to, I don't want to say escape, because there's definitely some action behind it. It's not like people are trying to escape into another reality. Sure. It's like, I wish that there was someone around who could handle this or could do something about it. Could fly around and stop bullets and beat up those bad dudes. One of the things, too, if you really are getting into superhero comic book history, I challenge you to always look at who the villains are, too, in addition to who the heroes are. Like, who are the super villains? Okay. Because they usually tell you interesting things about the time period. Example, Cold War era, so like late 1900s. You usually see a lot of villains who are scientists, or like they're mad scientists, or you see aliens, or you see, is it coming together a little bit? A little bit. Okay, I think I'm seeing it. Yeah, so what are some like villains, super villain types that you see nowadays? Like, it's just kind of, kind of cool when you start to think about it. I haven't really I mean, granted, I don't know much about, like, comic books, but if we're talking about, like, the Marvel movies, okay, yeah, I'm starting to see,
put some things together?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Well, I know one thing that you start to see a lot more, especially 1985 forward, like 1980s forward in comics, as well as TV show and superheroes in general, is you start to see more of a presence of, like, the businessman, or you start to see, like, politics, or...
Yeah,
like
things...
Tony
Stark's business partner was his enemy, and...
Exactly. Yeah, so you start seeing things that are very corporate. This is so different than, like, early comic books. In early comic books...
Well, I mean, early comic books, you had Captain America punching Hitler in the face.
Yeah, he really did. No, you had heroes going off to fight Nazis, like these, or in the case of, I mentioned Terry and the Pirates earlier. They literally were. It's like they were just going to different parts of Asia and just fighting people over there because they, it's a super racist comic book because it's the comic strip because it's the early 1900s. So
yeah, well, I mean.
No, it's like, it's really crazy to see how, like, whenever you're reading or watching, like, it's always interesting to say, okay, here's this hero, here's who's being applauded as, like, this big, amazing person, and it's always interesting to look at the villain, so.
Oh, for sure.
Another thing, too, that I love to talk about with heroes is, if you compare, like, the beginning of superheroes versus, like, later superheroes, the beginning of superheroes, they were perfect humans. They, like, were... flawless in every way, like the classic Superman.
Right.
Versus, like, think of later superheroes like X-Men or Spider-Man. Do you notice a difference?
Yeah, Daredevil, Punisher, like two Marvel shows that have just recently come out. Like they're all sorts of messed up. Like dark and brooding and bad. Like I feel like that's kind of the shtick right now is your hero can't be too perfect or he's unrelatable. Exactly.
It's like, that is such a huge, like, modern thing too. So, I mean, I'm sure Joe could say the same thing, but one of the coolest parts about history is, like, seeing how things were at one time and just seeing how it's different nowadays. It's crazy, like, the big switch to, like, brooding teenage from what it used to be.
For sure.
But anyway, those are some of the heroes or the comics or the superheroes that I know about. Again, it is a distinctly American thing, especially, I think, if Japan can claim giant robots, that's their thing. Like, they have 100%.
And you know what? Giant robots are fantastic.
They really are.
I will watch Gundam 08 MS Team over and over again until I die.
Oh, like, this is one of those things where I actually have read very few giant robot or seen or played any few giant robot video games, like, me personally.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, I even, my husband, he's also an artist. He actually has all the old Transformers and things like that. Wouldn't let me play with a single one of them. Not a single one. No,
I'm going to have words with him later at work.
No, you shall. But I think, so anyway, Japan, they can definitely claim giant robots. Europe, they can, honestly, I just look up European comic books. They're all beautiful, and they're just gorgeous and handmade and painted and just... amazing.
Nice.
So,
I don't think I've ever seen a European comic book, so now I'm actually genuinely interested in what that looks like.
They're bigger. They're like bigger comics in general. It's actually, so what you can do when you're looking at comic books in different parts of the world, you want to look at, like, where their origins are, how they're made. United States, we started in newspapers, and you can see that with, like, the mode of delivery. It's, like, meant to, even, like, now it's very magazine-like.
Right.
So you can see that origin. In Europe, it came from books. So so they tend to be, if you were going to be a comic book artist, you want to be a European comic book artist. Their deadlines are kick-ass. They're so good. Excuse me, I'm not sure if you want to buzz me out later.
No, you're good.
But, oh gosh.
I've sworn like 3 times already, so you're good.
Okay, excellent. But if you, comic book artists in Europe, they typically get to work, 2 to 3 days to make a comic book page. American...
To make a page?
To make a page.
Wow, that is nice.
Super nice.
Compared to, and I'm sure you're going to discuss the American turnaround time.
American turnaround time is a day for a comic book page. But you know what? At least we're not manga artists. So... Just throw a guess out there. How long do you think they get?
God, not even a day. Like hours.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
I know. I actually, one day, I thought maybe it would be cool to, like, look into being, like, wearing manga, or no, it's a bad idea. Like, oh my gosh, they have, like, these amazing desks, which have, like, millions of screens around them that have, like, TV shows running, because they work, like, 14 million hour days, like... Crazy. But anyway, yes, totally look up European comic books. Like Black Sad is a really good one.
Okay.
It's gorgeous. Like basically a detective cat. So
that's adorable.
I know you say that, but then you're gonna go re-see it, and you're like, "Oh no,
what have I done?"
It's actually super gruesome and really hardcore.
It's about a cat,
and it's about a cat. Well, it's like a animal. So if you've seen like the artist who worked on it, used to work on. I think he worked for Disney, and I think he worked on the Robin Hood.
Okay, yeah.
So like that kind of animal.
Right.
So.
Like the half human,
half human, half animal
hybrid thing.
Yes,
okay.
So that's a really good one. It's very beautiful. I'm trying to think of another like classic. I mean Tintin, but that's sort of like a very comic strippy classic style. So it's going to be like more tame. But really and truly, I would say like looking up Black Sad is a really good start. So
cool. Yeah, definitely gonna have to check that out.
Absolutely.
So I gotta ask you a question.
Shoot.
And I thought about it earlier, and I've been dying to know.
Yes.
Who's your favorite superhero?
No, it's so tough.
That's what I was I was trying to answer my own question. I was just sweating bullets over here.
No. That's a really... I would say, if I'm really honest with myself...
Okay.
It's gotta
You're allowed to be honest, too.
Shadowcat from X-Men.
Cool.
Loved her.
Nice.
Because she gets a little pet dragon.
Cool.
That's everything to me. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like that should be everything to everybody, but... I understand priorities are sometimes, different.
Oh, of course, yes, of course. I'm trying to think of, like, why Shadowcat. I think it's because even in the comic books, I think I just really liked that she was a comic book character. Like, when I first started reading superhero comic books, I was, like, middle school, high school, and she just seemed closer in age to me and more, like, obtainable. Okay. Where it's like, wow, this is someone who's actually kind of close to home to myself. I'm actually wicked shy, like Shadowcat, so...
Cool. Well...
Anyway,
good luck with this. I mean, you're throwing your voice out here.
I know.
To the introverse.
I know. I gotta say, it's way easier. Just like not seeing a million people at once, way better.
That's fair. Yeah.
But anyway, your favorite superhero or heroine?
That's fair. Gosh, I don't know. When I was a kid, it was definitely just all of the X-Men and Spider-Man.
Ooh, Spider-Man.
Spider-Man very particularly because. And I don't remember which iteration of the cartoon I watched, because I know there's a couple.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they vary on when his, like, kind of timeline is.
I feel like there's a couple, like, just a few, like a small handful of reiterations of Spider-Man. It's like, there's not many.
Just a little bit.
No, just like a couple. So you're going to have to really, like, specify, because I could really...
Yeah. No, this is, I'm pretty sure it was the first cartoon. Mm-hmm. So he was a little older, but I just loved that his Spidey sense, like, able to, like, haha, I got you, and, like, shoot web, and I liked that he was, at least in some iterations, like, he was smart, like all the superpowers weren't, like, because of the radioactive spider, like, he just, like, I built this cool Teflon web shit that, like, can pull down trucks, and I always liked that. As of late, I've been having a hard time because I don't really read the comics, and so I'm kind of basing most of this off of the movies and the shows, but they all do such a great job, with an exception for one of them. And
I
I'm
think
talking
we all know
to
that
you,
one.
Danny Rand.
Yep.
I don't know. Nowadays, that's kind of tough because I kind of like. There isn't one that I don't like besides that one. I think I just like the idea of the super smart people, like the people who aren't like I was never really super into the super strength, or my hands turn into boulders, and
or the
things
power of moodiness if you're Batman.
Right. See, Batman's a little weird for me. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with him because, like,
we all kind of do, Cody.
Yeah, when I was growing up, like, I thought he was cool until I realized, like, oh, he's just like a rich dude with, like, a lot of gadgets and could, like, learn karate and stuff.
I know.
And then, like, later, there's some cool things that they do with it. Like, I like certain bits of it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Batman because sometimes he's dark, gritty, and, like, I enjoy that. But then sometimes I like, take myself out of that, and I'm like, he's just, like, a rich dude with gadgets.
With lots of money.
Yeah, it's like, money! So,
I think...
gosh, I don't know, my favorite, I probably have to, I'll be, I guess, a little typical and say Iron Man currently. I And I know,
another smart
again,
guy, actually.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and I know he's, like, kind of rich and stuff, but, like, at least in the movies, I feel like he eventually redeems himself in a way. Mm-hmm. And I know... I don't know other people's opinions about it, but Iron Man 3, like, really brought it home that, like, he's not just the dude in the suit. Like, when he gets fucking home alone and, like, raids a bandit camp with just, like, stuff he got from, like, a Home Depot, like, that's where I was like, alright, I like this dude. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, we'll see with the whole Infinity War Part 1.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up.
I'm so happy about that.
I gotta tell you, another comic book, if you haven't read a comic book in a while, it is a absolute delight to read the original Infinity Wars comic book where it goes through the gauntlet and the whole shebang. It's just amazing. I said earlier that I actually do love comics where people are just fighting the whole time. Like, this is a perfect, amazing example where literally everyone is fighting all the time.
Nice.
It's amazing.
I want to read it because I currently... My comic book collection is terrible, by the way. I think I have the collection of the Marvel's Civil War. Mm-hmm. So, like,
that's a classic.
Like, I picked that up because I really liked the idea of all of the superheroes picking a side on such a, at least in that universe, a very controversial issue about identity and having... being private. And so, like, I thought that was cool. I definitely want to pick up... I don't know if I'll do it before the movie comes out, just because allotted time, but I definitely am gonna want to pick that up. It's actually...
No, for real. It's not as long as you think it would be. Like, I think when most people say, go pick up this comic, here's 200, like, issues, and that's what you need to read first, and then you need to read this one, and then you can read the story that I'm talking about. I know, yeah. Infinity War, it's pretty contained, I think. I'm saying that, but there are a lot of, like, things that accompany it, but really, just skip it and go to the thing. To all the comic book nerds out there who are purists and say that you need to read all the things, I am not one of you. I'm sorry. Godspeed. I salute you. I salute you.
Well, that's just a lot. Like, and for those people who are I've read every single thing, that must be fantastic. Like, that, like, just having, like, that experience of going through the entire story, that must be amazing.
No, yeah.
I don't have that time.
No.
And so I appreciate you as a person, but I probably won't go through that process with you. I'm sorry.
No, and actually, I know my husband and I, he's also a comic book artist. We've had many discussions on how we think that the fact that you do, like, sometimes it does present itself as a medium where you read all these things and then you can enjoy the story.
Right.
Really hurts it as a medium because it really closes the door off to new readers. Like, I remember I used to hand comic books to my dad and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And he's like, he would try to read it, and it was like,
that's nice.
No, kudos to my dad. He's pretty awesome. But no, that's a real thing with superhero. I think that's why most people's interaction nowadays is with movies and television. It's not necessarily with where they started. So,
and it's actually kind of funny that you bring up the idea that comics kind of have this situation where if you want to enjoy it to the fullest, you kind of have to read a lot and like get into like the deep past and like all the highs and lows.
Right.
And I actually feel like that's happening right now with the Marvel movie universe.
A little bit, yeah.
Because
no, for sure.
For any of you who haven't watched a Marvel movie, I don't know where you've been. You might have been under a rock, or maybe
in a cave far, far away.
That, or like you're a normal person, you happen to stumble upon this podcast.
Right.
But there are a ton of movies, and I would say most of them are good quality entertainment. Like, just like they might not be the best
good popcorn
stories, or they might not be, but they're good. They're good fun. I never came out of a Marvel movie being like, I hated the experience. This was awful.
Oh, never. Yeah.
You can gripe in things about kind of the way they do certain things. Like, I don't want to say I have a controversial opinion because I don't know the opinions of people, but like, I have compared to the people that I've heard from, an interesting opinion on Thor Ragnarok.
Ooh, do tell.
So, I know nothing about the Thor universe. The first Thor was probably the only movie that got close to, like, I wasn't super into this.
Yeah.
just because, I don't know, I guess I'm not super interested in, like, a literal god being a comic book hero.
That's so interesting, because that's because a lot of comic historians love to make connections to how we tell superhero stories and equate it to
how we used to tell God stories.
Exactly. So many people make that comparison. So it's interesting that when they actually do it, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, because, like, it's so on the nose. Like,
Yeah.
especially because in at least in college, I took a couple of different mythology classes. So, like, I know a little bit about Norse mythology, and so whenever they throw a name out there, I can already tell in my head where they're going and kind of how that's going to play out.
For sure.
So to me, it doesn't feel like, I don't know, like when I think of Spider-Man, if Doc Ock comes out, I don't know what he's going to do, but like if Loki's out there, I know what you're going to do. It's obviously not going to be what I assumed because you're a trickster and that's kind of your MO.
You mean he doesn't just go around and say like the most like stable, kind, like soothing thing and just totally like makes things very peaceful? I mean...
no, he doesn't soothe babies to sleep with his sweet melodies. So yeah, I guess that's my thing. But I did enjoy the second Thor movie, which was... the one with the Infinity Stone. I can't remember what it's called now.
You know, it's interesting.
Granted, I didn't like I thought the bad guy was kind of lame. Like they just went with dark elves from like fantasy culture.
Yeah.
Like what? Like you couldn't come up with some badass like.
Yeah, I really think a good supervillain needs to reflect that hero in some way. I mean, many people point out Batman and Joker as the ultimate like relationship.
Oh yeah, they're like that weird like. Two sides of the same coin kind of thing.
The ultimate frenemies, right. I feel like.
Totally, yeah. Yes. They're totally, like, Instagramming each other on the side, even though they gotta, like, beat each other up.
Which, by the way, the whole premise, I don't know if you've seen the Lego Batman movie that came out recently. But
I haven't.
Well, I have, because one thing I'm super nerdy about is if there's something out there that was made and it's animated, I'm pretty sure I've seen it. Okay. I'm really working on that list. There's a couple I've said, you know what, no, I can't bring myself to it, but I've watched everything, Cody. But anyway, the whole premise, like not the whole premise, but a big part of the Batman Lego movie was that Joker wants to be his number one supervillain. It's like all about their relationship.
Nice.
And of course, like one of the lines in that movie is that like he doesn't have an ultimate supervillain, that he just likes to like have many villains. He doesn't have like a significant villain.
He doesn't have his bestie villain.
No, he doesn't. And Joker's really sad. So no, I know.
That's so tragic.
I'm trying to, you brought up something interesting of, like, any superhero, like, retellings or something that I wasn't entirely happy with or I think could have been done better. And it's, like, I can definitely think of a few, but many times it's because I think since I got into comic books, like, I haven't said this outright, I guess, but I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design and I actually got a degree in comic book art, which is a thing. But a part of that was comic book history. So usually when I approach these things, it's like, well, how well did they do that? How well did they create this? Like, was that really the best choice? Like, that's usually the angle I come at it from.
Sure.
There is a Netflix television show where I really questioned their choices. So.
Is that the Iron Fist?
It is! Oh my gosh!
Sorry, this is gonna be part 2 of a rant that I've already had on this podcast about Iron Fist.
So do you want to rant first, or do you want to rant first?
I guess, let me start so that I can get it out of the way, because I know everyone, like, awful. Just the absolute word, like, part of it is the fact that your villain is the most interesting part about your show, period. Like, that's so, like, to me, that's never a good sign.
Never, yeah.
Like, I'm okay with, like, the villain being great, because I loved, and now I can't remember his name for the life of me, because I've tried to, like, repress these horrific memories.
Oh, I know. But, I'm going to do the best kind of rant later where I actually haven't seen the show. It's the perfect kind of rant, so just wait. So anyway.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like some messages got crisscrossed at the Marvel marketing team, but it's just like, it's trying to be too many things at once. Like, at one point, it's trying to be this almost Memento, like, no, I'm not crazy, I'm Danny Rand, and, like, that's an interesting thing to do.
Yep.
But then they give up on this whole thing, because wait, this is a superhero show, so they gotta, like, do kung fu, I guess.
Yeah.
And so then part of the show, which is done pretty well, I would say, like, the fight scenes are alright, You know, part of it is like a kung fu, you know, like kind of a taking back to a kung fu time.
Right.
Except the main character's a white guy, which feels a little weird. Like,
well, yeah, it's kind of pretty darn weird.
Yeah, it's super. It's probably not very cool.
No.
And then like the rest of it is like, oh wait, we got to put this in the Marvel universe. So then there's like these little like they like kind of pepper on Marvel stuff, and I'm just like, I'd rather watch that.
Yes.
Yeah, so
no, that's
it's not super great. That's my if you didn't watch The Defenders and me gripe about Danny Rand for like probably 15-20 minutes, that was my too long didn't listen situation.
Oh yeah, that's really. So I say.
And so from you didn't watch Iron Fist because I told you very specifically not to.
Oh yeah, no, I listened.
But you saw The Defenders.
I did see The Defenders, and I read up about the synopsis of Iron Fist. I watched the first episode to get a feel for it, just to see if I wanted to continue watching it. And I had a couple problems right away. And I think I mentioned before, I really like to look at, like, did you make the best decision? Was that the best way to serve the story? And to me, when I saw the Iron Fist, so I mentioned before how you look at early comic books and you can look at, like, what was and what is today. This is just so similar to what I've seen, like, early comic books that showed very racist and not very friendly depictions of, like, Asian characters.
Right.
It's not too far away, in my mind.
Yeah, it didn't do a very good job on that front.
No, because they're making these big general statements about, like, not even, like, having a specific Asian culture in mind. They're just like, oh, this is the kung fu that people do over in this place that's mystical. Ooh.
Yeah, fantasy, like Asia land is basically what they're trying to do.
Right. And
which feels really weird.
It's very strange, especially when, like, look at how many different resources that you have via the internet to do even a little bit of research into some of these different places.
Right,
you can
watch so many kung fu movies.
So many.
Crap.
I know.
Like, there's so many good ones too.
There are. And
I hear there's a good one, not necessarily a kung fu movie, but there's definitely a good fighting movie coming out.
Right.
Or action movie coming out. I hope there's fighting in it because it's got Jackie Chan in it.
Of course.
And I guess he's like Postal or whatever. I don't remember the name of it, but I'll probably like tag it in the video at some point.
Yes.
But I mean, there's so many good ones, and they couldn't be bothered to watch a couple of them.
Yeah.
To kind of get an idea, like
there's rich lore of kung fu movies.
And I think it. And granted, I don't know because I didn't read the comics. This could be a situation where the comic was written kind of in that light, that kind of semi-racist, kind of like we didn't know which direction we wanted to go with this, and so they just kind of took from the comic books, because I know there's like kind of a big stigma where if you veer too far away from its original content, people lose their minds. I mean, look at the Warcraft movie that came out.
That's true,
like,
yeah.
They went so far away and fans hated it, and most people were like, what's a Warcraft, and then didn't watch it.
Right. I think if I were to compare, like, I'm gonna make a very big claim here. I'm gonna make a stand.
Yes, please do.
Do it. I'm gonna make a stand that says that regardless of, I'm not saying you should ignore your fans, but I think that if you are looking at, like, taking a comic book, because a lot of superheroes are stories are adapted from comic books.
Right.
Some of those comics are old and have some aged parts about them, including racism. And I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna make a stand and say, nah, let's get rid of that. I feel like we're good. Like,
yeah, and that's totally fair. Because even as us going into this, like, it's uncomfortable. Like, and it's like, man, you couldn't have done your due diligence on this.
I'm gonna make a stand and say, I think that I'm working on being my own comic writer myself. Actually, I'm hoping to do a plug at some point for.
Of course, we'll do it after this little rant.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, after the rant, we got to do the rant. But anyway, as a comic writer myself, I think that we all have just a responsibility to try to be good on that stuff. Yeah. Like, try to do the right thing, because you're dealing with outdated content,
Exactly.
Like, I think that's important. I mean, even, look, I'm the biggest Lord of the Rings fan ever. Well, no, Joe is on this podcast, so that's not true.
You guys are going to have words later, I know.
I know. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, but I'm going to go out there and say I loved the film adaptation. It was super cool. I wouldn't mind if there was, like, another, like, amazing, like, female swords person in that whole franchise. I'd love that.
I was, even when I first, because I didn't read the books. I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I felt like, in my head, I'm like, where's the cool, like, why is it a bunch, why is there a bunch of
dudes.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, some of them are small, but, like, that doesn't count.
Small people don't count. No, actually, for those of you listening, I play a paladin gnome in our campaign, and Cody often likes to make me do checks based on being short. I slam this guy's drink onto the floor. You gonna do an athletics check for me soon? Yeah, I am. Yes, I am.
That's just a little joke amongst us.
Yes. But anyway, no, and actually, I know that deviates from original content, but hey, I'm a girl and I want my swords people too. Like, that's would be my claim on it. You know,
well, hopefully with I believe it's Amazon is picking up the rights to do a TV show. So hopefully they do some work there and show us that we can also have badass females wielding blades and bows and whatever.
No, yeah.
So this is where we've gotten a little farther than midway point. But we do need to plug in. We do need help from our listeners and stuff. So
here, I'm gonna do Joe singing. I've worked really hard on this. Joe's for you. Do 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 do. This is the middle part. Do do do. I'm such a great singer, but do 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 even better than Joe. Do do. Okay, go ahead, Cody.
So yeah, Fandom Roulette. We're here because we love talking about nerdy stuff. We want to build a community around you guys. We want to be, the best that we could possibly be, and the only way we can do that is if you join in the conversation, whether it's to give us an opinion about what we said. Maybe you didn't like some of the bits that we said here, or maybe you'd like to correct us about a certain point that may change kind of the way the conversation went, etc., etc. There's a ton of different ways to have this conversation. You can email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to get at us at Twitter, you can do that at fandomr_podcast. That is our Twitter handle. If you want to find out information about what we're doing, where we just got uploaded to iTunes, Fandom Roulette. You can download directly from the source at SoundCloud. We're also Fandom Roulette. And then our website. We're going to post things kind of as things move forward. We're going to probably settle down with like a format, how we're going to move forward, etc., etc. Especially in situations like this, where we want special guests to come on, or when Joe or I can't make certain times, and so we might do some other kind of cool content for you guys. You can follow us at www.fandomroulette.com. That's where all of our information will be. Do you have any plugs for yourself?
Yeah, one thing I'd love to plug is just my website at samrevely.com. That's REVELEY. That's where I'm going to be posting some content. If you're like, hey, she mentioned comics, that sounds pretty cool. I'd love to see what comics she's doing. I post a lot of my work there. And pretty soon here, we're hoping to get some online comics going.
Nice.
So, yeah, specifically, we're doing a sci-fi western. So,
perfect. My
so that would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you wanna sing us out of here?
Boop doop boop boop boop.
Perfect. So, we've talked about superheroes. We've talked about where they kind of, sort of fall, like origin story, if you will. We talked about, we've got all over the place.
Yeah. We talked about 1950s when they burned comic books.
Yeah, that's insane. That's still insane to me.
Yeah, no, it's...
I mean, granted, I guess I should, like, expect that from humanity, because we also did burn books and do lots of terrible things, but again, humanity surprises me every day.
Especially the parents out there. You just never know.
It's true. They don't want their kids to look at Jason comics or whatever horror comics were out at the time.
I mean, it'll make your brains melt. They come right out your ear. You'd be shocked.
For sure. So I figured my expertise in this field is, the movies and the stuff, and we've kind of loosely talked about stuff, and there's a podcast on the Defenders. Feel free to listen to that if you want my full opinion on that show.
How do you feel about that Danny guy? I mean...
Oh, it's the worst. God. But I have played a ton, unfortunately, of superhero video games.
And I've played none.
So to get on this topic, that most of them, there's a couple of gems. There were a couple of Spider-Man games that came out in the early, I want to say 2000s, right around the time GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox. Those Spider-Man games are super good. They got the feel of like web slinging in downtown.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be a really bad comic book nerd now too. Ooh.
Downtown.
It's New York City. Spider-Man's New York. He's a New York guy. Like that's the thing.
Okay, yeah. They did use a real name. I'm thinking of like the DC universe where they used like fake names like Metropolis and things like that.
No, Spider-Man is actually, even the artists who work on Spider-Man tend to use a lot of New York City reference images for New York. So he's a Yorker.
Cool.
So that's very established. Okay.
So it felt really good in those games to sling around New York City as Spider-Man. However, there are some very terrible ones. If you want to pick up one of the most infuriating, just downright terrible, like just in terms of game design, Superman for the Nintendo 64 is by far. I rented that at Blockbuster. This dates me a little bit.
Blockbuster, what's that?
Blockbuster.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, that's where you used to rent DVDs and movies and games.
Cody, what's DVD?
Oh no, stop. I rented that, and no joke, I couldn't get past the first level, which is just kind of this abysmal flying situation where you gotta fly through rings, and like, as a kid I thought maybe it would redeem itself, but like, the controls were really bad.
Was it one of those where when you flew and you like thought you were flying in one direction, but then you fly completely in another direction, where you're like, who designed this?
It's been so long, and it's one of those like I'm opening up a treasure trove of nightmares for myself thinking about this game. There a couple of good ones that are. I know there's a Spider-Man game that I'm looking forward to that's coming out within the next year. I think Activision's making it, but I could be wrong. I'm sure people will blow me up for not remembering.
Oh, it's okay. They're going to get really angry with me already.
But there was at E3 this year, they released some cool gameplay stuff. Lots of stuff that I feel like is really on point with Spider-Man. Like he's a spider, so he's kind of sneaky, and so a lot of it's got like fun stealth mechanics where you kind of go around and figure out like where people are, so you can kind of plan your best attack. You've got your web slinging. The one thing I noticed that I'm like kind of like, I don't know how I feel, is like kind of these weird quick time events, but I feel like it might work for him to kind of do the whole Spidey sense thing, maybe. But I know that quick time events is kind of the bane of most gamers' existences. I'm on the fence still. Like I think they can be done properly in the right situations, but a lot of games don't do that.
So, I have a very silly question. What is it? So, I'm in the ballpark.
Oh, yeah,
I love video games, and I like to play them a lot, but I'm actually kind of like what do the nerds say nowadays? I am a cash, I think.
Oh, okay. Cash. So you don't know what a QuickTime event is?
I don't know what a QuickTime event is.
Guys, we're gonna deep dive into some fun game mechanics. A QuickTime event. This got really popular with Resident Evil 4. This is where you kind of started. Like it's been around, but it got really popular with this game. Basically, a QuickTime event is at a certain point in the game just prompts you to quickly press a series of buttons.
Oh, did they? I think they had that in Kingdom Hearts, didn't they? Or no? Kinda?
Yeah. They implement that. You can do bonus damage in Kingdom Hearts in certain areas if you mash the right button. So yeah, that's the premise. They call it QuickTime events. I think Resident Evil did Resident Evil 4 did an alright job with it. Certain areas it was very because it was my first time really getting like head first into it. So like there are scenes and like there are cutscenes within Resident Evil 4 where it's just like, here's this movie that's playing, so I'd set my controller down. However, then it would be like, press B really fast, and it's like, wait, no! And then you die.
That sounds like a terrible, horrible thing. I love when I don't have to do any things and I just watch the things. Right, it's great.
But it was nice with Resident Evil 4, because it's supposed to be a horror game, so like the whole time you're supposed to feel tense.
Yeah.
So I think it worked well in delivering on the whole horror experience. However, and there are even some games built on the whole concept. Like Heavy Rain is another good example, and I love that game. I thought it was really fun. Literally every person I talked to when the first time they played it, we all had a different experience in Heavy Rain. Like the game ended differently for all of us, and I loved that. And I thought the mechanics I liked it because The QuickTime events didn't stop the game. It just meant you were going down a different path.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, a little off tangent for the QuickTime.
No,
event.
thank you. I needed that.
This new Spider-Man game looks pretty good. There's a couple QuickTime events, but I think if they do it properly, it could feel like Peter Parker Spidey sense and like, you know, him dodging a bullet or getting out of the way of a helicopter crashing into a building, because that seems to happen with Peter Parker.
Yeah, absolutely, every day. I mean, he rides those helicopters around too. He just kind of, you know, goes in little. And
then those Injustice games are pretty fun. If they're,
I have seen those.
Yeah, they're your like Street Fighters. They're side scrolling fighters. I guess that's the appropriate term for it. Those ones are set in the DC universe. You got like your Batman, your Superman, your Supergirl, Cyborg. I could probably go on and on. They also include some villains like Deathstroke, I believe is the correct one. Harley Quinn. I'm not sure if Deathstroke is a DC villain. I could be wrong.
That's getting into, like, actually, in terms of, like, where I'm the most nerdy when it comes to comic books, it's definitely with, like, comics that no one's ever heard of. So,
right. So the popular one's not so much. Okay.
Right. So if you like Craig Thompson's Blankets, I'm your girl. But if it comes to, like, a very specific, like, villain in the Marvel or DC universe that has, like, a very short run, I probably won't know them. So.
Fair enough. So, yeah, there's a couple good games. I think the problem with a lot of licensed games, because this is kind of a rampant problem with just like movie games or games based off of other intellectual properties. These developers either spent a lot of money or spent a lot of time getting the specifics down for how they gotta look. And I just recently found this out.
What's that?
If Mickey Mouse is in a game, they have to develop an engine to make sure his ears are done properly.
I believe it.
In a 3D space, because I guess if you do a side profile, the ears have to be a certain way based on the brand.
Yep.
So that you get like the two circles and then the one for his face.
Yeah.
And so for people who made games with Mickey Mouse and they were 3D games, they had to build engines to make sure the head at any given point was on brand.
Wow. I had no idea it was that specific, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so that's kind of the extreme example, but like imagine that with, you know, your other games where they probably spent, like, especially because I remember one of my favorite disappointments, I guess, was the Matrix video games. So those games were just awful.
There were video games for the Matrix?
Uh-huh. They had one for the Matrix Reloaded where you played as the two side characters.
So how many bullets do you dodge, like, approximately?
Approximately, like, 0, because I could never figure out how to do it.
That sounds like the worst Matrix game ever.
Yeah, my strategy was to eat the bullets, but that didn't work for very long.
Oh no! I want you to know, I usually miss like video game lingo unless I'm like really familiar with it. I really envisioned your character gobbling bullets as they came closer.
I'm just eating it. I'm using that Matrix speed to just like eat the bullets, but.
There is one superhero video game that I have played that I actually did really like, that I thought did a good job. The Batman series, Batman Arkham Asylum.
Oh, yeah. Those are great games.
Those are awesome. I feel like those, if I were to pick, like, my favorite superhero franchise superhero franchise video game, that would be it.
Oh, for sure. I think the Batman games, because I liked the first two. Those are the ones that I played. I kind of understood where it was going. It's like, all right, this is kind of the same game, but you're telling a different story. And
right.
I've had my fill of this kind of combat and all that stuff. But guys, we're gonna spoil Arkham Asylum here a little bit. So I thought the ending was ridiculous and so out of character for the Joker that it like kind of made me like want to vomit when I got to that fight.
You know, I'm trying to...
Because, like, he's so clever, and he's so smart, but it's a video game, so let's make the Joker the Hulk.
Yeah, no, that's definitely...
I mean, the mechanics to defeat him were very clever, and I liked the overall fight, but I didn't like the fact that just, for me, the Joker, this whole game has been this kind of conniving, clever asshole, keeping you in this prison.
Right.
And they left it to a a Hulk fight at the end?
I
like,
know,
it felt so weird.
No, especially, I mean, if you look at why I think the Joker is such a great villain, it has nothing to do with him being strong. It's like in fact, I imagine my favorite versions of the Joker, he's not especially strong or, like,
right.
He's just really crazy. Like, really crazy.
Just
like,
batshit insane.
Oh, yeah. Like, completely illogical, doesn't follow anything. In fact, a lot of my favorite, like, Batman renditions with the Joker, they have the Joker doing something that's just, like, mind-blowing. It's just like, what? How screwed up are you? This is so crazy.
Right.
So, you expect, like, I mean... I'd expect the game to take a psychological thriller perspective. Like, whoa, right. I never realized, like, this is insane. How could he ever do this? Right. Sort of twist.
And even, I'm trying to remember how the second... So Arkham City ends with a pretty huge... I mean, granted, I know that this universe is probably its own canonical universe. It doesn't exist elsewhere. But, like, the ending of Arkham City... Mm-hmm. is you in it not on purpose, but the Joker ends up dying because of the kind of the rabble rousing that you two are in. Right.
And I feel like that if they could move in something where I think there's always this conflict, like my favorite conflicts with Batman and Joker in the comics and in the video games is when their conflict is so, I want to say, violent that it starts affecting other people, like the city. And that's when that conflict gets really interesting. Because then it's like, Batman's in a position where he's like, man, I can't beat this guy. Like, should I just kill him? But he doesn't kill anyone. That's his thing. Right. So it's really interesting to see that conflict come to play. So, and even at the end of the first one, you're still beating him up at the end. That just doesn't seem very Batman-ish, I suppose. He always tries to find, like, this interesting, clever way to put him out, so...
Yeah, so it's kind of unfortunate, because, like, that's what I was hoping for, is, like, you fight him, and maybe he's got, he throws all of his goons at you or whatever, but, like, maybe there's some kind of trick where you use the Batarang to, like, hit certain parts of the environment so that Joker falls into a net or something. I don't know, something, like, clever
or Batman, or the Joker tricks him in such a way where he's putting other innocents in jeopardy, or he does, like, a random... Like, kind of like in the movie, what's the Dark Knight something or other?
Yeah, the Dark Knight.
Yeah, where there's, like, two boats, and it's like, where, which boat are you gonna, like, are you gonna pick one? Or it's... Right. I think that's way more Joker-ish than what they did. Than, like, the Hulk.
Then, like, oh, I'm big and strong, and boom.
Boom. Done. Yeah. They even have, like, the very video game arena, and...
Oh, for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the... It's kind of my only real... Like, because I love video games. I'll play video games till I'm, like, old and gray. But one of the big gripes I have... Right. When I can just, like, inject them with needles.
Yes.
Liquid video games. But no, the one thing I don't like is that there are video game tropes that some games fall on to complete a game, and they just don't fit the narrative or the story or anything that's going on. Like those tropes work in a Call of Duty like game where your whole job is to shoot the other guy on the other side of the screen.
Right.
But, like, Batman has a very particular feel and story, and to me, it doesn't do it justice to give him a very gamey boss battle with your typical knee-high cover and your arena that's so very specifically like, oh, I fell into the arena of the final boss battle. Like,
you almost expect to see barrels just around.
Yeah, like red barrels, so I can like hit him with the Batarang and blow him up. Yeah. But no, none of that.
It's actually, I'd say... Honestly, it's interesting you bring this up. This isn't really in the traditional superhero context. But I'm going to go there with the Star Wars Republic game because Star Wars is per Marvel Disney. It works. It's fine. So,
it fits.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, one of the things about... I really tried the Star Wars Republic game, or I think it's what it's called. It's the MMO they made.
Yeah.
I really gave it a solid try, because I love Star Wars.
I did as well. I picked it up day one.
Right.
Played it with my friends. I even tried Hutball.
Oh, you did? I actually didn't mind it. It was alright.
Hutball was alright. It got weird. Yeah. Because certain classes were better at it than others because it was a very mobile situation. But anyways, go on.
Yes, of course. But in terms of, like, video game tropiness, where I think that it doesn't suit the story. One of the things with that game that really just started to get to me after a while, one of the things I love about Star Wars is just the idea of there's this vast galaxy where you go to different places and you see them. And I was like, wow, this game looks like it has it. I'm so excited. And every time I went into a new environment, I'm like, oh, and there's another stack of boxes there and there. And I started feeling like I was walking through the same room over and over again.
Yeah, it definitely has some very unfortunate theme park MMO problems. You're just, because I think the first place is like a good, like, all right, like this was cool. Like I liked some of the stories that they were involved. Like I liked the fact, and I played Sith because Sith all the way, I guess. But one of the things that you got to do on, I believe, like the first real planet you go to, not like the starter one that like kind of begins, is you get to talk with a group of Sith who are also using light side power, so they're kind of like in the middle. Like they use the light side and the dark side in tandem, and if you play as like a Sith operative, your whole job is to shut them down because they kind of go against your... And I just, like, there's some really cool, like, universe expanding ideas that they brought into that game, but it's just kind of unfortunate that it got fit behind a kind of mediocre RPG.
Yeah, that's it's like I thought that when I got down to it and I was actually playing the game, I'm like, I'm not really, this is not a new experience for me. I feel like I'm playing the same game over and over again and not a fun way, I suppose.
Yeah, it got very repetitive.
Yeah. And I think really a successful RPG has a little diversity in it. That way,
oh, for sure,
you can experience new things.
Yeah, you can. It's got to, in my opinion, good story. It's got to be up to date. Like, I'm sorry, but unless you're doing something really different with that turn-based RPG, like, I don't know if I can do that anymore. Like, yeah. I've literally dumped parts of my life, like on a level I'm probably not comfortable with sharing on air. Not that I have the exact time down, but
okay. I'll pull
up
like
how
many
days
hours.
And days, like especially like with like World of Warcraft. Like I think the last time I checked on one character, I put like an entire month's worth of playtime on that character.
Yeah, no.
So, like, I've put a lot of time into RPGs, and, like, at this point, if you're not doing something to kind of innovate or be different from all the other ones, like, I'm sorry, I can't do that anymore.
I know, it's like, I already put so much time into this.
Right.
No, that's real. I also have invested a fair bit of time into the World of Warcraft, and I really think that game took up so much of my own mental energy, like, to learn.
Yep.
Like, I gotta tell you, Cody, I've been bringing up David a couple of times, my husband. I think he'd be great on here, by the way, if you ever want to invite him, if you want to.
For sure.
But anyway, like, he grew up playing World of Warcraft all the time. It took me about 4 years of dating him to understand half of what he and his brother were talking about all the time. Oh my god, like... And I like the game. As I said, I like playing video games, but it took so much investment to learn that. And now when I pop onto other ones, it's like, I feel like I'm just playing the same game. So it would have to be really different for me to want to put time into it and feel like a different experience. So
yeah, for sure.
That's how I am about it anyway.
Well, we've deviated off the comic book path a little bit.
A little. I would say, it's interesting that we bring up Star Wars and World of Warcraft and these other things because... we're really looking at... I don't think they're so dissimilar from the conversation of superheroes.
No, they're not. Because especially with Star Wars and I think it's the Old Republic. Yeah. But you were playing a hero at some... Or a villain.
And they have powers.
Right. I guess... Well, and that's the tricky part. So you were playing hero... You could have played a hero or a villain on either side of the Jedi-Sith spectrum. Right. Because I know I made a Sith... who was actually a good... Like, I picked all the good options because I thought that was that might be a more interesting choice. But ended up not being. But yeah, I mean, video games are kind of... To me, it made sense to be the next logical step for superheroes. Like, I want to hear about superheroes. I want to play as a superhero. So all this stuff kind of jives in at some point. You got to dig a little deeper to find the connection there. But yeah, no, I don't think we got super off tangent.
Nah, I don't think so either. But anyway.
Yeah, but we have hit the end of our time. Sam, it has been a pleasure having you on, and I can't wait to have you on again at some point in the future.
Awesome.
We already did our plugs. Please, if you're on iTunes, if you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review, comment, tell us what you think. Those go a long way for us. Check out Fandom Roulette. Like, if you happen to jump on at this episode, please check out the other ones. They're all super great, super fun. We're going to do more of this stuff in the future, so please, keep a lookout for us. If you want to talk to us, do the usual stuff. But, signing off. I'm Cody.
I'm Sam.
And as always, keep it nerdy.
Super nerdy.